Hey guys, we're going to talk about ordering fractions today from least to greatest. So if you look at these fractions that I have right here, here's our first set we're going to look at. You should notice that they all have the same denominator. And if they all have the same denominator, then that means they all have the same number of parts or the same number of pieces in their whole. So if we thought about each one of these as a pan of brownies, each pan of brownies is cut into 10 pieces. And out of this piece, we have 3 of those 10 pieces. And out of this one, we have 7 of the 10 pieces and 1 of the 10 pieces, 6 of the 10 pieces, and 2 of the 10 pieces. So when they all have the same number of pieces originally, that means all of their pieces are the same size because they're all the same number. So that makes it a little easier when we're ordering. So I want you to pause this video for just a minute, and on your paper I want you to order these for what you think will be least to greatest and then come back. Okay, so hopefully you order these from least to greatest. Now when we look at this, when we know that they all have the same number of parts in their whole, then we just have to look at how many pieces each one has, how many of those parts we have. So our smallest one is going to be 1/10. That's going to be our least amount that we have because we only have 1 out of 10 pieces. Next would be 2/10 because here we have 2 out of the 10 pieces. And so next would be 3/10. We have 3 out of the 10 pieces. And then next, you should know, we're going to have 6/10 because we have 6 of them, and then we have 7/10. So if you look at all of these, here we have only 1 out of 10, 1 part out of 10 parts of the whole, and here this one has 7/10, 7 out of the 10 pieces that we have. Okay, so that would be ordering our fractions when they all have the same denominator. Now we're going to take a look at ordering fractions when they all have the same numerator. So this time our denominators are all different. That means our whole is split into all different parts. This whole is split into 20 parts, 9 parts, 11 parts, 50 parts, and 33 parts. But with our numerators being the same, that means we have the same amount out of each whole. So whereas on this one, we had different amounts from each whole, but each whole had the same number of parts. Each of these wholes has a different number of parts, but from each one we're taking the same number of pieces or the same number of parts. So now we've really got to think about how big are these pieces. Since we've got 4 out of each one, well, which one of these 4s is biggest? Which one's smallest? I want you to, again, pause for a minute and think about these. Think about what's going to be the smallest fraction that we have here, what's going to be the largest fraction that we have here. So take a minute and order them on your paper. Okay, so now when we look at these, you've talked about this in class, whether you're in Ms. Stark's class or Ms. Lynch's class. You've talked about how the denominator, how big or small the denominator is going to determine how big or small the pieces are. So if we look at this, 50 is our greatest denominator we have here. That means, think again about each one of these as a pan of brownies. That means on this one, your pan of brownies is split into 50 pieces. So those pieces are going to be pretty small because there's 50 of them. Whereas this pan of brownies is only split into 9 pieces. So those pieces are going to be a lot bigger than if you had to split it into 50 pieces. So if we have 4 of those 50 pieces, or we have 4 of those 9 pieces, this one's going to be very small because they're huge pieces. A huge number of pieces, which makes them tiny. So that means this is going to be our smallest fraction. We've got a ton of pieces in our whole, and we only have 4 of them. Now, next, if you look at these, we have our denominators, 29, 11, and 33. So I want us to look now at 33. This means our whole was split into 33 pieces, and we have 4 of them. Think back to this one. Our whole was split into 50 pieces, our pan of brownies, and we have 4 of them. Well, out of these two, the 33rds are going to be bigger than the 50th. It would be the next biggest one in our list, because there's only we only have 4 pieces out of the 33 pieces in the pan of brownies. So next we would have 4 33rds is how you would say that. Now we have 20th, 9th, and 11th. So this pan of brownies cut into 20 pieces, this pan of brownies cut into 9 pieces, and this pan of brownies cut into 11 pieces. So of course the one cut into 20 pieces is going to have smaller pieces because you've got to have more of them. So out of our ones that we have left, 4 20ths would be our next smallest fraction. Now these are pretty close, 9 and 11. But again, you've got to think, if you had a pan of brownies and one is cut into 9 pieces and one is cut into 11 pieces, which one's going to have the smaller pieces? Well, the one cut into 11, because you've got to have more pieces. That means each piece is going to be smaller. So then we would have 4 11ths, and then we would be last 4 9ths. Now, Miss Lynch and I have heard some of you say things like, the bigger the smaller, the bigger. And while that might be true, we do not want you to think about it in that way, and we don't want that to be your answer when we ask you which one's bigger, which one's smaller. We want you to be able to explain it, saying things like, well, this whole is split into 50 pieces, and I only have 4 of them. That means I have 4 out of these really tiny 50 pieces, so it's going to be a small amount. This whole is cut into 9 pieces, and I have 4 of them. If you think about that, this is almost half, because 4.5 would be half of 9. So I've almost got half here, and this is nowhere near half, because half would be 25 50ths. So this is a whole lot less. So those are the kind of things we want to hear you say when you're explaining this. Now we're going to look at fractions that are all different numerators and different denominators. So we have 8 9ths, 1 8th, 3 6ths, and 11 10ths. So when we're ordering these from least to greatest, we need to think about the magnitude of these fractions. That means how big it is, how small it is, and what we know about those. So what we know about 8 9ths is that it takes 9 9ths to equal a whole. So this one is only 1 9th away from being a whole. So that means this one's pretty large because it's almost the whole. Now if we move to 1 8th, we can think about, well, if we had a whole split into 8 pieces, we only have 1 of those. We don't have much at all. We only have 1 out of all these 8s. Now 3 6. I hope when you see 3 6, your mind thinks, I know that's 1/2. That's what you should think when you see a fraction like this, 1/2. Your mind should also be thinking something when it sees 11 10ths. Your mind should be thinking, wait a minute, that's an improper fraction. And if it's an improper fraction, that means automatically you know it's more than 1 whole, because that's what makes it improper, is you've got more than a whole up here in your numerator. So if we thought about this, if we took 10 tenths over here, which is the same thing as a whole, and we have 11 tenths, that means there's going to be 1 tenth left over here. That means 11 tenths is the same thing as 1 whole and 1 tenth. So just thinking about this in this way and thinking about what we know about each of these fractions, it pretty much has lined them up in order for us just by thinking about it. So I hope when you're thinking about this, you think, well, of course, 1/8 is going to be the smallest. And then if this one is so we've used 1/8, let me cross that off. This one only needs 1/9, and 9ths are not going to be very big. Look at this 8th, it's pretty small, and a 9th is going to be even smaller. We only need 1/9 to get to a whole, and this one's a half. So of course a half is going to be less, because it's not almost a whole, it's half. So 3/6 would be next. And remember, I know I have told my class this, that if you're given 3/6, even though you know it's a half and you should be thinking about that it's a half, when you write your answer, you need to write 3/6 because that's the fraction that you were given. If you want to maybe under it write 1/2, that'll be fine, but I want you to include 3/6. So we did half. Now our two that's left are 8/9 and 11/10. Well, this one is almost a whole, and this one is a little bit bigger than a whole. So if this is almost a whole, that means it's going to be the least out of those two, which means this one, 11/10, would be the greatest. And again, on 11/10, if you wanted to write 1 and 1/10 under it, that's fine with me. But I would like for you to write 11/10 since that was the fraction that you started with. Alright guys, I want you to remember what we talked about with ordering these fractions and apply it on your work. Apply it on what you're doing. Have a great day.